Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. This morning we are talking about the progress that's being made in Pittsburgh by police in their effort to continue to fight violent crime. How changes in the relationship between police and the citizens are certainly making a difference in that battle. Joining us now are two guests. They work on a daily basis with the people in the police zones, with the patrol officers, and they are Levani Bickerstaff, the Assistant Chief of Police in the city of Pittsburgh, and Reverend Cornell Jones, who is the coordinator of the Group Violence Intervention Unit in the city of Pittsburgh. I'd like to welcome you both to the program.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
You were able to hear the comments that the chief and Wendell made just moments ago on this program. Anything that you'd like to add when it comes to community policing that you're seeing on the ground level, on the front lines?
Well, the front lines, I mean, Cornell could probably speak more about the front lines, but as far as policing, it's all about building relationships. Community policing is the beginning, but of course the more in-depth thing is knowing everybody that you serve by name and knowing their circumstances and what is impacting their lives. And that has a lot to do with being boots on the ground, being there in the community.
Right. So this is a pretty big city. Are you saying that police officers know pretty much everybody in this town?
I'm saying that they may not know everybody in this town, but I think that's our goal, to be able to, as far as the constituents that we serve, to be able to have a relationship with them and be able to say who they are by name and not just sir or ma'am. When we respond to a radio call, it's very important that we get to know who they are and what their needs are.
It takes a lot of time, doesn't it?
It does take a lot of time.
Reverend, you can't do that from behind a desk, can you? You can't do that from the pulpit of a church. You can't do that unless you literally are there talking to people, shaking hands, rubbing shoulders, right? I mean, it takes a concerted effort on your part. How do you do that? How do you get out to go to those places, sometimes places where you might not want to go?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Reverend side. A good pastor smells like the sheep because you're around the people so much that you love. You know, I like to be around the people and make sure that I'm connected to the people. In fact, what happens is a lot of times we'll go to places together, both myself and law enforcement, to be able to work together to learn the people, to learn to connect with the children, to connect with the coaches, to connect with the people and meet the people where they're at. And instead of waiting for you to come to them to come to you, it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen. And sometimes it happens, but majority of the time you have to go to them to be able to love on them and build support and build a connection and let people see that, you know, in fact, you know, we all have a common focus, and that's stopping violence and keeping our people safe.
Chief Schubert made the same comment about starting with young people.
Yeah.
How important is it to start gaining that trust when a child, second, third, fourth grade, you can build that trust early on?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I was telling someone yesterday, a lot of the people who are doing community intervention and stuff like that when I was a kid were my superheroes. Those are the people that I looked up to, and it's amazing because I looked up to them, you know, including my father, you know, because I looked up to those people, I became this person who does a lot of the street violence intervention and things such as that. So it's really about setting examples and letting people see that there is another direction.
And have you seen change?
Definitely.
As a result of this?
I have.
How dramatic?
You know what's amazing is we're seeing people finding their role. You know, for years people would come to me from the communities and even from the faith-based community to people, you know, when I worked with victims, and they say, how could we get involved? Now we're showing people that you have a role. Not everyone has a street-based role, but everyone has a role in counteracting violence. And I'm seeing people getting involved to the point where my phone is blowing off the hook because people are saying, I want to get involved. I want to mentor people. I want to get involved in, you know, making phone calls to people who might not have someone who actually cares about them. One of those basic things that I've learned from working in dealing with people who are dealing from the streets is mostly people just want to be, they want to be loved. Sounds funny, it's cliche, but they do, and they want to be able to make somebody proud, including themselves.
What are the tools, either one of you, that you wish you had that you don't have right now? I mean, is it a matter of having enough people? Is it a matter of having enough places that you can get together, safe places that people can? What do you wish you had?
I think, of course, you can always have more people, but I think what's happening is this is more of it's a philosophy, but it's also turning into a movement, because the more we are on programs like this, we go to different community forums, you get the people. People want to volunteer and help. And just like Reverend Jones was saying, everybody has their own lane. Everybody's lane may not be actually being a part of an initiative where they actually go out and interface with people. But some of them are very good writers. Some of them can help us put together different type of bulletins that we want to do, make phone calls. Some of them are part of the outreach teams where they volunteer at different festivities that we have in the city. So everybody has a role, and the more that we get the information out there, we are seeming to get the people who will volunteer to help us out with our initiatives.
So how different is this form of policing from the policing that when you first started?
When I first started, I started as a community police sergeant. Community policing has been around since, I want to say, the early 1996, but before that, there was community policing in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, but we just didn't call it that. The difference in this initiative is that we're surgically looking at a few people that's causing the violence, and we're offering them resources, and if they don't heed to our warning, then of course we're making arrests.
And how easy is it to identify them?
It's not easy, but it's doable. We can do it through our intel-led policing, and we're able to determine the groups that's feeling the violence in the city of Pittsburgh.
Reverend, isn't it an oversimplification to say it's tough love, that it's a matter of taking justice to them and saying it's either this or that? I mean, that's what Andy Sheehan's piece was talking about at the beginning. You need to make a choice. Do you want to go this way or do you want to go that way?
See, the thing is, if we're gonna give you an opportunity to make a choice, we're gonna walk with you through that situation. It's not one of them things where, you know, we're gonna knock down the hammer and say, but right now I'm willing to tell you that I'll go with you and make sure that our outreach services are going to go with you to be able to help you get employment. You know, we even have a person who, you know, I've really been pushing people, as Chief was saying, to find their lane. A lady said, I'm not a street person, but I have an organization that helps to help people with tattoo removal. So she said that right there, that's a key part of being able to counteract violence, because that person, someone who has a tattoo that might be a gang violence tattoo on them, that might not be able to get a job. So right now we're helping to build people's self-esteem. We're helping to build people's you know, helping them to have a purpose and helping them to have some type of foundation so they can actually go into the community to do what they've been called to do. You know, I just wanted to share something that was amazing. It was when we've gone to the different places where there's been thousands of like young people. Like we've had, you know, of course the law enforcement that's there. We have had our outreach team that goes with us, but we had a bunch of volunteers that were coaches, ministers, mothers, cheerleading coaches. You know what I mean? Everyone had their role. So when things were about to happen, we were at the point where that coach was able to say, hey, you know what I mean? And because they knew that person, now this is a volunteer, because they knew that person, the person who was about to fight stopped fighting.
Give us a specific example, a specific episode.
Well, actually, what I'm doing is I'm giving you an example of, if you look at Light Up Night downtown, when there's a bunch of kids down there, we were able to deal with a situation where a bunch of the kids were about to fight, and we dealt with the situation where the coach was able to stop the kids from fighting. We knew that it was about to go to a whole nother level of aggression. We stopped the situation. Where if you look at the statistic on that night, there was only one arrest out of the thousands of people that were there. It was because the people who were volunteering and finding their place in the dealing with the violence, everyone had their role and everyone implemented those roles at that time. So we came together.
They have this notion, WAR, wins against replacement. Wins against replacement, right?
Okay.
What's the violence against replacement? What's the, what might have happened, say at Light Up Night, had you not been there and this process not been in place?
I mean, it's even beyond Light Up Night. There have been numerous times when there has been the fuel and there has been the fire. We're even dealing with the custom notification when we've gone to.
You guys are asbestos, right?
Coming in between?
We're trying to be firemen and women to be able to put these things out. But when we see the fuel and the fire, it's coming closer and closer, and all the elements that needed to really cause a kaboom or an explosion are there, but to be able to have those people that were interrupting that violence before it happens was
Sometimes
huge.
it happens real fast, doesn't it?
Extremely fast. But the thing is, because we have people, including the law enforcement, who are working with us that are able to see things before it happens, to be able to see a lot of those people that we're dealing with that are coming to help volunteer used to be in the streets. So you have that eye to be able to see what's going on before it actually happens. And a lot of times those young people are able to say, that's my mentor, that's my coach, that's my pastor, she's the mom of the community. So we're bringing all the people together that need to come together to say, hey, no excuses. It's not a us, it's not a they. Why aren't they doing things? It's not, why aren't we doing things? So we're coming as a united front saying that we could do this.
So there becomes an ownership of that situation that makes a difference.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very, very much. We very much appreciate the explanation and for what you're doing.
And
Thank
the
you.
work.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you.
David and I will be back with some final thoughts as the KDPG Sunday edition wraps up in just a couple of minutes. Thank you.